Hey everyone. So I hope you guys liked the video that I put out earlier today where I went over Ptolemy's 48 constellations and I showed you a couple of new words that we can use to break down the Bible. Just to go over a couple of them. Crown, chariot, ship, cup, altar. Those all have constellations from the 48. I've got my amazing friend and astrologer, Priscilla, coming on right now. What we're going to do is we're going to go into astrology. Not astrotheology, but astrology. And we're going to define a bunch of words so you guys understand what they are when an astrologer just starts going off and explaining to you what a midheaven is, or a retrograde, or a supermoon, or when they start talking to you about nodes. You got to know what that stuff is. So let's bring on Priscilla. Hello.
Hello.
So for everybody who knows, I'm giving a lecture in northern Kentucky on the 17th. So it's 2 weeks. Literally, it's in under 2 weeks. I'm going to be in the northern Kentucky area. So anybody who watches this who's in Ohio or Kentucky that wants to meet up, just hit me up on social media. So I've got Priscilla here in her lovely backdrop. And she's starting a podcast.
Yes.
She's starting a podcast in a month. And what she doesn't know is that when she told me that, I bought her a microphone. And it's being sent to her house right now.
Are you serious? That's crazy. Look at the synchronicities. So cool. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's a microphone. It's got the thing in front of it. What I don't use because I'm lazy. So I've got Priscilla on. We're going to define a bunch of terms for when they go off and read and explain it to you. And you're like, yeah, but what does that mean for me? Well, now you can understand how they figure it out. So we have a list. We're going to go through them. I'm going to let Priscilla guide this conversation. Originally, I thought maybe we could have just pulled up a random chart and you could have just given a reading based on a random person, but I didn't think that was the right thing to do because
we don't necessarily have to do the reading part, but I can break down what each house means, what each angle means, what each planet represents, the rulerships. Because I think it is important when someone's getting a reading and they're looking at their chart, they need to know what you said, where is the astrologer getting this information from and how. You have to understand the definitions for sure. So
okay. So
I mean, if you want to, you can get a random one.
So where do we start? When you're, and we know that you're unconventional. That's what I love about you, is that you're unconventional. You have your own way of starting. Start by explaining how normal astrologers start looking at your chart, and then explain how you do, and then we'll start getting into some of the words.
Okay, so the consensus is that every astrologer is now using whole house system. And what that means is it's equal 30 degrees for each house. Initially, when I started, I was using Placidus, which is a whole nother system. It does not give equal angles, equal 30, degrees for each house. It just kind of lays out the way that it was when you were born. Okay. But a lot of astrologers don't like to use Placidus because it's not, if you're doing a generalized reading for a group of 10 people, you can't really get, generalized. You can't just aim it for those 10 people. If you're using Placidus, it's more personalized. So that's just the difference. When I do start my podcast, I'm going to use whole house systems just so that everything is equal. But when I do my personal consultations, I do use whole house, but I also use Placidus just to kind of get a closer, a more bird's eye view of what the energy was when they were born. And now
when you do your readings, you use tropical astrology.
Yes,
right?
I'm a Western tropical astrologer.
Okay,
so we have different systems. You have, Vedic, sidereal. You have,
And from what I gather, Vedic and sidereal, that's adding Ophiuchus, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I want to say sidereal uses Ophiuchus more. Vedic does recognize it. But, Western, we don't use that. And that's because we do our astrology based off the ecliptic and not the constellations. So it's a little different. But they're both in respects to that form, it's still accurate if you're looking at it from that system. So all the systems work. They're just tools to get to the same information, basically.
Right.
That's
They're
what
basically like different brands of cars, right? They all drive.
Exactly, but the car's still going to drive you to the same destination. Right. Exactly. Bingo. I like that analogy. I'm going to use that.
Okay.
So I do now when I do my podcast, like I said, I'm going to use whole house systems, and that's what most of the YouTube astrologers are using. And it just makes more sense because you can kind of just get what that energy is going to represent in that house for you once it moves in there. So like for right now, example, I'm a Pisces rising and we have Venus in Pisces right now. Okay. And it's Venus is exalted in Pisces. Exaltations just mean that planet is functioning at its highest potential in that energy. So Venus is in domicile in Libra and Taurus, which means it's home. That's their home signs. But when it moves into Pisces, it's now more powerful because it's an exaltation.
When she says they're in their home, guys, she means they're the ruling planet.
Yes, that's their ruling planet, exactly. I want to see what degree Venus is in right now so I could explain this part. Let me look real quick. 1 second. Okay, so Venus is at 12 degrees. Okay. Now I brought that up because my ascendant when I was born is at 9 degrees. So technically now Venus is in my first house if we're using Placidus. But if we're using whole sign, the moment Venus went into 0 degrees Pisces, it was in the first house, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's the difference between the systems. And this is why I use both on a personal reading so that I can see, for instance, Venus, how much is actually affecting you that day when we're doing the reading versus, just looking at it from a generalized perspective. I want to see if it's sitting on your ascendant or if it's inside that house, if it's, what degree it's actually, touching and, sparking up. Because every time a planet moves into a specific degree, it's getting more and more powerful and closer to wherever your planet is. So I have Jupiter at 13 degrees. So now we have Venus sitting at, what did I say? Was that 12 degrees?
12.
Right. Yeah. So it's literally sitting on top of my Jupiter. So my natal Jupiter. But we wouldn't, and this is why the degrees are important. You have to see the degrees so you can know how close it is, to a personal planet or to your birth planets. I do orbs. So what orbs mean is the degrees between where your planet is. So I got Jupiter at 13 degrees, and yesterday, or let's say 3 days back, Venus was at 9 degrees. It was in a 12, 11, 10, 9, 4 degree orb. So that's all you're doing. That's what orbs mean. It's that simple. Just looking at the energy in between it. Most astrologers only use like 3 to 5 degree orbs.
So if each sign is 30 degrees, right?
Yes, each sign is 30 degrees.
So then if something is at 29 degrees and something is at 1, then that's what?
They're not even talking to each other now.
Right, but that's what, 29? That's like 29 orb, right, or something?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're saying like 1 degree Pisces and 29 degree Pisces, you have Jupiter in 29, you have Venus at 1. They're not really talking to each other. They might be in the same house. They might be putting the energy of their personal energy into you, in your first house or whatever, but they're not conjunct. They're not close. They're not affecting each other. So we look at the planets when they get close to each other as they're communicating and they're trying to work their energy together. So sometimes, like if they're planets that don't get along, that's where you can feel tension. Okay. So that's why when we have squares, oppositions, or conjunctions, we feel the tension because these are supposed to be harder angles to deal with.
Okay. Life. So what is a square, an opposition, and a...
Okay. So a square is a 90-degree angle. So now we're using geometry. And so we can say like if you have a planet, we'll go back to Venus again. We have Venus at 12 degrees in the first house. If you look at your fourth house, which would be that square angle, and you have a planet at 10 degrees, let's say I have Chiron there. Well, my Venus and my Chiron are now in the square and they have a power struggle okay? Because squares represent power struggles. Oppositions are 180 degrees, so they're opposite, exactly what the word suggests. And they just mean that they're opposing energies. And again, you want to give a 5 to 3 degree orb with that. If it's a powerful planet, like let's say Pluto, because it's so magnetic, I go all the way to 10 degree orbs because you're going to feel that. It's very intense. Same with Uranus. It's very intense. It's very chaotic. I think it's very important to understand the astronomy of the planets in order to do astrology, because you got to know how they, their force, their velocity, how they function, if they're cold, if they're hot. That matters in astrology.
Does it also matter that Venus spins counterclockwise where the rest spin clockwise?
Yes, all that matters. Just like we pay attention to the retrogrades, and even though that's an optical illusion, it still matters.
So define retrograde. Before it's kind of like when something speeds up, it seems like it's going backwards. Can you define that a little bit better?
Yeah, like how you're looking at a car if you're sitting and then the car is moving and you're like, oh my God, my car is moving. But it's just an optical illusion because it's the car next to you moving. So that's how we're kind of looking at the retrogrades. And what it means is just it slows down. It's not going backwards. It's just slowing down. It's not moving as fast as it typically does. And it does this so that you can go back and retract. So I call it the re's, like revise, retract, realign, readjust. You're going back and just crossing your T's and dotting your I's before you move forward again.
So why is Mercury retrograde so popular in modern culture? And what exactly do people describe Mercury retrograde, what it does for people?
Okay, so Mercury retrograde is so popular because it's the planet that retrogrades the most. And it's because of its orbit. It's the closest to the sun, and so it moves a little bit faster than the other planets, which is why it has its retrogradation moments. I think it's like 3 to 4 times a year, give or take. It also depends on the element that it's in. So this year, it's an Earth element. So the whole 2023, we're going to see retrogradations in Earth signs. Okay, so we have one coming up, and I believe it's going to be in Taurus first, then we'll see it in Virgo and Cap, so on and so forth. We saw the first retrograde in Cap back in December as we were moving into January of 2023. And then it went retrograde, or went direct January 18th, but when
it goes direct, it means it's not in retrograde anymore.
Yeah, meaning it's not slowed down anymore. It's finally picked up the pace and it's going forward again. Gotcha. And even though it did that January 18th, we have a moment of shadow period because it takes a second for it to catch up. So that shadow period, you're still going to feel that retrograde. So right now, we're still in that retrograde season. It doesn't fully catch up until February 11th. So we're still going to feel it until then. And I think that, too, is when all the planets are fully direct. So after February 11th, we're going to feel like just a quick leap. People are really going to start putting, everything into motion. And this, I hate the whole juju part of it because you can still plan things. You can still omit things out during retrogrades. But you hear a lot of people saying, oh, don't do that. Don't do your meetings then. Schedule. It's not that serious. It just really depends what's aspecting it. So let's say you have a Mercury retrograde and it's in square to Uranus. Maybe that's not the best time to fly because Uranus rules aviation. And, if you do fly around that time, expect delays, flight cancellations and all types of bumps in the road. But it doesn't mean if you do this, oh my God, the plane's going to crash. It doesn't mean that. I think a lot of people just kind of make it bigger because it just did get so popular mainstream. And it was the easiest to understand because we have it happen so much, and because it's so close to the Earth and to the sun, we feel Mercury more when it goes into its retrograde compared to other planets. We'll see a lot of accidents in the road. We'll see a lot of technological issues and your phone glitches or this email gets sent to the wrong person. And that's, that's understandable because it's so close to us. We feel that energy. But again, like I said, it really matters the element that it's in. So that'll give you an idea of what type
Give me the 4 elements real quick.
Okay, so we have earth, we have water, we have fire, and we have air. And we have 3 signs for each element. So that they call that a triplicity. I don't know how to say it.
So ether is not one of them, right?
This is if it can be in even wood in Chinese astrology. So it just depends again on the systems that you're looking at. Okay. So in Western, we only use those 4 elements.
So let's only talk about
Western.
Let's only talk about what do you call it? Tropical.
Yeah.
And if I bring up something and you're like, that's in another one, we'll just move past it.
Okay. So yeah, in Western, it's only, tropical Western, it's only earth, water, air, and fire. And you have 3 signs for each element. Okay. And so that's why we're only going to see retrogrades in Virgo, Capricorn, and Taurus, because we only have 3 signs in that element. So I'm trying to think, what else can we talk about besides the elements? So we want to talk about the modalities also. So you have elements that each sign belongs to, and then you have a modality. So the element is the type of, like you got fire, which is passion. You have water, which is, emotions and intuition. And then you have air, which is logic and reason. And then you have earth, which is, being grounded and practical. But then we have to look at their style, which is modalities. And modalities are more so fixed natured or mutable, which is more, versatile. Or you have cardinal. Yeah. And so cardinal's more sort of like an initiator, and like, I look at cardinal people as like the starters, the game changers, the initiators of life. They start something, they have the creative ideas, and then you need to go to the workers, which would be the mutable people. They'll come and they'll work, they'll bring a flair to it, but they might not complete something. So then you go to a fixed element, which will actually see it all the way through to its completion.
So guys, just so you understand, cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Cardinal, fixed, and mutable. There's 3 different types. There is 4 seasons. So each season has one of these: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. The first sign in the season, which goes by the solstices and the equinoxes, by the way. The first one is the cardinal sign. That's why there's cardinals in church.
And it's cardinal fire.
Yeah, and each sign or can be broken down into 3 10-day segments called deacons, which is why you have cardinals and deacons in church, by the way. It's astrology. The second sign is the fixed sign. The fixed sign is called the fixed sign because it's dead in the middle of the season. And then your third sign that takes you out is the mutable sign. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, so I like that you said that because Aries is first because it is spring and it's the beginning of life, and it's fire because it's that passion to exist. It's that igniting, which is why it's an initiator. So I love that you brought that up, because if you look at it from that perspective, you start to understand what each sign is here to do, what each energy brings to the entire whole of our existence, and why the calendar is based the way that it is. I mean, not Gregorian, because it starts in January, which it's annoying because it's like dead winter. I'm like, why are we starting like the new year in the dead winter?
Did I explain that to you?
I think I saw it in one of your podcasts, but no, go ahead and repeat it again if I can remember.
It's because Sirius, our binary dog star, is at its height, the highest it's going to be ever. And Sirius is in Cancer to begin with, so it's already up there. But its height, it's at the highest that Sirius ever will be, is at midnight on December 31st.
So that's why we start the year there.
Yep.
Interesting. I gotta look astrologically wise what Sirius is in astrology.
It's absolutely idiotic that we don't start, because the Jews start the new year around the fall equinox.
Yeah.
Rosh Hashanah. You have the Passover. You have Easter. In the spring equinox. The calendar used to start in.
Yeah, we had a thing called celestial calendar, which started then. So.
Right, and you have Aries. If Aries is technically the first month of the year, then Sept, Oct, Nov, December, 7, 8, 9, 10 makes sense because they all line up. Mm-hmm. They were just changed because we added Julius Caesar and Caesar Augustus.
Yeah, and then we got a new calendar.
But, the year should start in Aries. That's where we should head back to.
March 21st should be the first day technically.
Right.
So, but whatever, I think maybe at one point we will get back to that. I feel like people are starting to understand that.
We'll evolve that way. We will.
I think so too, because I think it's very important that we get back to that proper frequency, because us starting our new year in January, I feel like as a collective, it throws everybody off. I wonder why things are so chaotic and out of whack. We should be working with the clock of the universe. That's what I call it. So. Okay, so what were we talking about? Modalities, elements. Trying to think what else is important. Okay. So basically, when I start my charts, because most astrologers look at the ascendant and the sun, I do too, but I typically start in the 12th house.
So wait, describe the ascendant first.
Okay, so the ascendant, you will hear it called the rising sign, or the first.
It's part of the big three, right?
You said what?
It's part of the big three.
Yes. So your big three in psychology would look like ego, id, and superego.
Right.
And in astrology, it's your rising sun and moon. Now, the rising, which is your ascendant, is not the same as your first house. Okay. I want to put that out there. The rising is the point that was rising when you were born. Okay. And then it is the first house is the lens that you see through. Okay. It's your embodiment. It's the way that the world sees you. So one is a point when it begins, and then the first house is your layout. It's your embodiment. Now I do look at that substantially, but I always focus on that 12th house first, because that's the life that you came from. So you're coming from a past life and you're coming through that 12th to that ascendant point, and then boom, you're born. And then you're your first house. And so when I meet people and they're like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, sun sign, I'm this sun sign, and they're so tied with it. I mean, people get so offended when I'm like, well, you're not a Libra sun, you are your rising sign. You're striving to be your Libra sun. This is what your job is in this life, is to aim for that energy. This is why it's so tied to your ego, because the sun is your ego. So that's why everybody's so tied to their sun signs. And I was even the same way when I found out I was a Pisces rising and not a Scorpio sun for real. I mean, even though I am, I was like offended. I was like, no, I'm Scorpio.
Yeah. I'm a Libra, but I found out I'm an Aquarius rising, and I'm okay with that.
And that's okay.
Yeah. My mother's actually a pure Aquarius too, in her sign.
Yeah, she probably was very significant in your life because she helped to develop your identity. And so that's important when you're doing readings as an astrologer. If you have if the native has a parent who might have the same sun sign as their rising, you know that parent played a very big role in their life. And they're probably close, because your mom's sun falling in your first house, she highlights your identity. She highlights who you are. And anytime the sun is shining on us, we feel love and warmth. So you might have a stronger connection with your mother because of that. Yeah. And so this is why, like there's also this thing in astrology where like you can be, like, for instance, me, I'll give that as an example. I'm a Pisces rising, but I have a stellium in Scorpio. So I feel so tied to my Scorpio energy because I have 4 planets there. And that's what stellium means. Stellium just means, some astrologers use 2. I use 3. It's 3 or more planets that are in one sign. So you're going to be your rising sign, but you're going to tie yourself more on an ego level to this energy where your stellium is, because you feel it so like strongly in your body. It's so many planets there. So many areas of your life are tied to that energy. So I have, 4 planets in Scorpio. I deal with a lot of scorpionic themes, even though I'm a Pisces rising. But my lens is seen through Pisces, and the world sees me as a Pisces. So I can come off as very sensitive and soft and lack boundaries and dreamy and in my own world and very spiritual and stuff like that. But once you get to know me, you start to see my Scorpio energy because I have so many planets sitting there. So it's interesting to like really do these readings and learn people, because then you get to see their layout, you see their energy they're working with, and it tells a story. It tells your, where you came from and what you have to clear out and work with in this life. Okay. Everything is lessons. So it's not like you're here, just for no reason. I believe we pick our charts. We pick our themes according to what we incurred in other lives. And that's the 12th house. So this is why I start at the 12th house, because I want to make sense of what traumas and fears and phobias you're dealing with that you're blindsided from. The 12th house you cannot see. It's behind the scenes. You yourself might have a hard time seeing it because it's automatic. And it's automatic because it comes from another life. So it's just like what's dormant in your DNA. We have to work with that shadow so you can activate, your DNA, your good, your bad, your ugly, your fears. A lot of our fears aren't even, I like that. What's that saying? Fears are, it was an acronym for it. False experiences appearing real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I look at the 12th house. It's a lot of things that are false from other lives that don't have any relevance in this life, but they stay attached into your DNA. And so your subconscious will bring it out a lot, and it comes out through people and experiences. So a lot of things are automatic for us. We gravitate towards certain people because of what's happening in that 12th house or what's karmically tied to you. So same thing with the nodes. We'll jump to that real quick. So we have the South Node and the North Node, also known as Ketu and Rahu, which is more Vedic and sidereal. But you'll hear Western astrologers use that terminology as well. So if you hear that, you know why. So South Node is Ketu, North Node is Rahu. And that just represents the dragon head, Rahu, and the tail, which is Ketu.
I'm assuming that because you have a North Node and a South Node, they're going to be opposing signs on the zodiac, right?
They always are. Absolutely. So they're not, it's not going to be like one over here to, a square. Absolutely not. They'll be 180 degrees apart from each other. So I'll use me again as an example. My North Node is in Aries at 20 degrees, which is great because we're about to have the nodes shift into Aries Libra. So I'm about to have a nodal return. And North Nodes are your directions of life, where you're going. So I think it's in August, our nodes move. Don't quote me on that. But when they do, I will be experiencing my next new 18 to 20 years of life, like my next new direction of life. And so the South Node would be Libra because my North Node is in Aries, and they're at the same degree as well. And the South Node is just also ties like the 12th house. It has a lot to do with your past life. So where you came from, these are your natural gifts. These are your comforts. So a lot of people unknowingly operate a lot out of their South Node because the North Node feels very alien to them. It's very uncomfortable. This is where you got to step out of your comfort zone and strive for something else. But the North Node is the destiny point. So we really should be looking to our North Node and aim towards that. But like I said, it's hard because South Node is comforts. I think too, like it depends on the system that you're using. So like, for instance, if I was to look at, let's say, forensic astrology, I've been getting into that a lot. Or criminal forensic astrology. I've been looking into that.
Okay, so before you even say what you're going to say, you have to define that.
Criminal astrology. Okay, so I'm going to actually define it like this. There is astrology for everything in the world. So you can make a chart for the dresser if you build it. If you know the time that you built it, the location and the date, it has a birth date. And you can do a chart for it. And then you can look at what is going to be the story for that dresser, even if it's not a real human, because everything in life has a starting point. So everything can have a chart. So you can use astrology to do forensics. So there is such thing as forensic astrology, just like you can use astrology to do medical. There is such thing as medical astrology. You can use astrology for death astrology. I'm in a group where people do death astrology. Now it's a little bit unethical. So you don't just go and tell people if you know how to do it. You just don't look at a chart and be like, oh my God, you're going to die like this or this. Like you don't do that. It's more so we study death people that have already died. We studied their charts to understand what planets like we're transiting and orbiting, or what was happening when that person exit out. So there are ways to see that. Just like there's ways to diagnose diseases. And
I would love you to freaking look up Rasputin's chart.
Who?
Rasputin. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I haven't, but give me.
He's a Russian. He's a Russian lunatic. I'm gonna find some crazy dude and I'm gonna have you do their chart. But anyway,
yeah. So, you mean like alive or dead? Is this guy dead?
Dead. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, give me that, and then I can kind of like, without even looking him up, I can tell you by looking at his chart what happened.
Okay.
I need you to give me his day of birth, but I also need the date he died. So if you can get that info to me, I can make two charts. I can compare it, and I can tell you what happened.
Okay.
But I forgot what I was saying.
We're talking about medical forensic.
So it's the same thing with like medical astrology. You can use, now when you're using these charts, when it comes to these other practices, it does change, but not so much. So now you're looking at it from a different lens. So you can't use like Western techniques for a death astrology, if that makes sense. And so it's the same thing with like medical astrology. With medical astrology, I love it because you're looking a lot at the elements. You're looking at a lot at what the planets can do. So for instance, like whenever you have Saturn coming into someone's first house, you know that person potentially is going to lose weight. They're going to deal with a lot of cold situations because Saturn is frozen. So it can come and bring like, cold body, somebody that's dealing with being, low anemia. They'll deal with like knee issues because Saturn rules Cap, that rules the knees. So these will be themes. Of course, the aspects matter. So you can't just throw something out there without looking at the entirety of the chart. But
so just for you guys listening, I want to explain what you just said a little bit, I guess, easier. The head is Aries. The body wraps around the zodiac with the feet ending in Pisces and the head starting in Aries. Each one of these zodiac signs rules an area of your body. Taurus would be your neck.
Anatomically, how it's astrology.
Libra would be your kidneys, for example. And where you are strong there, from where you are born, is where you are usually strong. This is anatomical astrology, or whatever you just called it.
Yep. And that's how we can see if someone has ailments in certain areas because of where it's placed in the chart. Because remember, not everybody has Aries at its starting point. That's just how astrology works. However, you could have been born, like for me, where Pisces is at my rising. So Saturn coming into Pisces in March, I potentially know I'm going to be dealing with feet issues, stuff of that nature. So, and because it's also into my first house, and the first house rules the head. So it's not just Aries that rules the head. It's also the first house because Aries rules the first house. I can deal with a lot of headaches as well, even though it's going to be in Pisces. So it's just really like you said, like you have to understand it anatomically. You need to understand it astrology is not just the surface. It's not just like horoscope.
So explain what the first house is, because I think a lot of people are thinking, you're saying, well, Aries is the first sign. Isn't that the first house?
It would be if you had it exactly how astrology is lined up. But because the planets and the constellations and everything's constantly moving up there, we understand that you might not have Aries as the first sign. You might have it as Virgo. You might have it as Scorpio.
Right. So define the first house, because once you define the first house, you could just count along the zodiac till you get to the 12th.
And then you just move around. Yep.
Right. So how do you define the first house then? Is that like I'm a Libra sun. So is my first house Libra?
No, because we don't know where the sun is unless you have your time of birth. But with your time of birth, you can find out what your first house is and where your Libra falls. So knowing that, we know that you're.
Oh, your first house is where the sun is when you're born.
No, the first house is the sign that was rising before the sun when you were born. So you were born as a Libra, but Aquarius was rising behind you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That was the sign that was rising right when the sun was about to go up. So that's why you're an Aquarius rising. And so knowing that you're an Aquarius rising, that would put Cap in your 12th house. That would put Sagittarius in your 11th house. Scorpio in your 10th, Libra in your 9th.
House is your rising sign.
Yes. And if we understand that the first house is your rising, we understand that yours is in Aqua. So if we look to 12, what comes before Aqua? Capricorn. So we know that your 12th house is Capricorn. And then so if Aquarius is your rising, then that means if we're looking at 12, 11, 10, 9 would be Libra, because Libra is how many signs away from Aquarius, the rising point. So that's how you can find out where your sun is, because you're a Libra sun. So now we know your sun's in the 9th house.
So based on what you just told me, let me put a thought together. If my 12th house is past life, and which is Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, which is also known as Satan, does that mean I had a rough past life?
I hate that people think Saturn. Okay. Saturn is technically Satan in mythology, but Satan isn't some little monster running around with horns and poking a pitchfork. No, that's just an allegory that they gave us to kind of describe that energy. But what Saturn is that energy. It's just the energy of like restriction and limitation and discipline. So people look at things like that as like, oh, that's devilish. Why are you limiting me? Why are you disciplining me? But if we start to understand Saturn, it's just to bring you balance. It's just to bring you groundedness. So Saturn is very, very like strict energy. So they correlated that with the devil because back in the days, they didn't understand that discipline was needed to create a foundation. They looked at it like, oh my God, that's bad, that's evil, instead of understanding on a more deeper level that those are more so lessons. Those are more so karma. So folks are just afraid of karma basically back in the days. And that's how we got the devil, analogies. I think it was a way to like project and not own up to what they've done. Right. So in your past life, you dealt with a lot of authorities. You could have been an authority yourself. And because Saturn rules it, because Saturn rules it, you could have mishandled that energy of being authority. That's why it's in your 12th. And it's in a blind spot. But then because it's Capricorn, you got to look at where your natal Saturn is. So I'm not sure. Do you remember where your natal Saturn is placed in your chart?
No, you have my chart, and I have no idea.
But we'll use mine as an example. My Capricorn is in my 11th house. Okay, that's the community. That's your hopes, dreams, and aspiration house. That's the house of groups and allies. It's an auspicious house. It's a lucky house, and it's considered a money house in astrology. So we have money houses as well. So then I look to, well, what is ruling that house? So who's the ruler of Capricorn for me? It would be Saturn. So then I would look to my chart. Where is Saturn? And in whole house system, Saturn is in my 10th house. It's in my career house. So now I understand that my career is going to have a lot to do with allies, with community, with the internet, because the 11th house is the internet. It's natally, it's ruled by Aquarius, but I have Capricorn there, and it's people in high places, it's CEOs, it's corporate, it's businesses. So that's how I understand, okay, to satisfy my Saturn that's in my 10th house and aim for a good career, I need to start working with this 11th house where Capricorn sits. I need to start collecting, getting in groups, merging with allies, using the internet, using technology. You start to satisfy it. And then because of the 11th house is an auspicious house, this is where you can get your hopes, dreams, and aspirations to manifest. So these charts are roadmaps. They're just ways to find out how to get on your path, get all your shit you want, clear out your debts, and have a better life. The goal is to bring your energy up as high as possible, as leveled as possible, so that you can be optimal. But we have a lot of traumas. We have a lot of things that follow us karmically that we have to work through. So you're not going to, even if you do get to that dream that you want, this is where we see a lot of people, they get to their dream and they lose it all because they didn't work with all their other baggage that they had to clear out first. So,
yeah. So what I'm going to do is we have some words left. We have a bunch of words left. I want to start going through it. So can you explain what a grand trine is and a trine?
Grand trine? Yeah. So grand trines, these are, when you're looking at a chart, there's all those little messy things in the inside, like lines and stuff. And these are aspects, right? So a grand trine would represent, let's say, like water, right? We have Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces. If you had a planet in each sign at the same degree, you would create a grand trine, which means all of these houses and energies and planets are talking to each other. And they're talking to each other in a trine, which is favorable. So trines are, I call them, are highly synchronized and bringing of luck energy. Gotcha. So that's what a grand trine is.
What is a regular trine then? It's just one then, right?
What is a what?
A trine, just a trine.
So a trine would be like, so a grand trine is like those 3 planets in the charts in those houses. And then a trine would just be like this planet and that planet are trining each other. So gotcha. That's on the lower scale.
Got you. So what is sextile?
So these are all aspects. So sextiles are cooperative energy. They work with each other very well and they can flow together. So these are opportunity energies. So while trines are kind of easy flowing and they're just luck and they just come your way, you mastered it, you don't got to really work hard for it. Sextiles are opportunities to work with it, to be able to get that, luck out of it or get flowing, working energy together. So a lot of people love trines because they're easy. There's nothing to work on. But being an astrologer and doing so many charts, I realize that sometimes too many trines can spoil someone, and it can make somebody a piece of shit because they're not having to work hard in life. So they're getting everything handed. They have a very limited lens. So I like sextiles more so because they are moments where there's an opportunity, but you have to still work it. So then now you're getting more respect out of what you had to go through in order to achieve that. So that,
Right.
it's more so like refining someone.
So what is the midheaven?
So these are angles in the chart. We have the ascendant, which is the rising that we were just talking about. We have then across from it is the descendant, and then the midheaven is above. It is the highest point in your chart, and the midheaven represents your status in the world, your reputation. The midheaven can represent your career path, what you want to, like a legacy, like what you want to leave in the world, and how you want to be seen. So for instance, you're a writer, and you have books. That is your status, and that is what's going to be left for people to know you as. That's that, and that's how the world will see you. That will be your reputation. Oh, Micah's a writer. He writes these books. Da 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 da. This is also where people can see, like, even though seventh house is your marriage house, the status can be seen as, okay, Micah's married. That's another representation of it. In modern astrology, the 10th house is considered father. But if we go back, the 10th house in ancient astrology was mother. But I look at it like this: the 10th and the 4th, which is the IC and the MC, midheaven, and the immuncoli. I don't know how to say it. But those 2 points to me are just the parents in general. So whoever was
the 10th and the 4th would also be
because
opposing.
they're across from each other.
Yeah, they'd be opposing signs.
Exactly. So
guys, how I figured that out, just in case you guys are kind of really, really new to this, there's 12 zodiac signs.
Mhm.
So if the 10th sign, its halfway point would be 6 signs away. So count
exactly.
6.
You look
So
at
you
the
go from
30
10 to
degrees,
4,
360
you can
total.
tell right away they're opposing signs.
Yeah. And it's
1
all
to
math.
7, 2 to 8, the same thing. So that's how you figure it out.
Exactly. So if we know that the IC, which is the 4th house, is 90 degrees from the rising, then we know that the opposite of that would be the 10th at 180. Exactly. It's just like a math, it's the basic math, guys. I know nobody likes math for real, but it's very basic. So those points, the midheaven and the IC, which is the 4th and the 10th, are supposed to represent mother and father. Now, here's the thing. Your midheaven and your IC might not be in the 10th and the 4th if you're doing Placidus system. But whole house system, it will always be there. That makes sense. Because we're looking at it even 30 degrees.
So when we talk eclipse, most people just think of a solar or a lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
How does the eclipse in general fit into this?
So eclipses are very powerful moments in life. So we're going to have our last one in the signs of Scorpio and Taurus coming up. And then they're going to move with the nodes in Aries and Libra. They are very strong, and they happen with the luminaries, the sun and the moon. And the reason why that is because that's what highlights us on this world. So when these things eclipse each other, now you're getting like a super energy coming out. And back in the days, people were scared of eclipses. So in ancient times, people were like worried. They would hide themselves in the house. Don't go outside.
Did I ever tell you the Christopher Columbus story?
I don't think so.
Christopher Columbus came here on the boats. And when they got here, a lot of people were sick. A lot of people were starving. Some people had died. And Columbus went up to the natives. And he said, will you give me food? Will you give me blankets? Will you give me shelter? And they said no. So he went back, came back, and said, you have angered my God. My God is going to make the sun go away in 2 days.
Eclipse.
And the ancients, not the ancients, the natives laughed at him. Well, he knew from his astronomer and his astrologer that there was going to be an eclipse on a specific day.
Mm-hmm.
So he used that against them. And then when the sun went away, they went batshit crazy and gave him everything.
Mm-hmm. And that's because it covers when we have we are actually speaking on a full moon, which is funny. So full moons and all that are not the same as eclipses. Okay, I want people to understand that because some people think they're the same thing, but they're not. But they're kind of like full moons, like what we're dealing with today. So we have a full moon because the sun and the moon are in opposition to each other. Okay. And when we have a solar eclipse, that's when the moon and the sun are together. So if that makes sense. So that's the difference between the full moon and the solar eclipse. But I do believe that when we have eclipses, you can see things kind of get chaotic, and it's because of the intensity that it brings. So I do understand why they called it gods and stuff like that. But now that we're in more so a modern time and we understand science more, we really understand that it's not so much about, oh my God is, mad, so it's going to make something eclipse. It's just something that's happening scientifically up there. You know what I mean?
So if they're both deal with high level energies, right? You're talking about a full moon and an eclipse, even though they're not the same. Can they present similarly in a chart because of their energies?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. One would be more significant to the solar and one would be more significant to the lunar. So like today we have a lunar full moon. And so it's in Leo. So we're dealing more so with the lunar aspects of things right now. Full moons are releases, new moons are new things initiating. Okay. And eclipses are like just high peaks of situations that need
to. The full moon in Leo, even though Leo is ruled by the sun, what would you make of that?
I think it's outstanding because the sun represents ego. And so the full moon is highlighting the fact that we need to let go of a lot of our ego-based things. The sun also rules over masculine. It rules over a father figure. So we're dealing, and so if we look at it from that perspective, we're dealing a lot with the masculine side of us, learning to release that aspect in ourselves. So it's not more gender, because I think a lot of people think, oh, well, if it's masculine, it's male. It can be. So the masculine, the men in the world can feel it a little bit more intensely right now, but it's more so dealing with the masculine in us because we have both polarities. We are the moon and the sun. We are feminine and masculine.
Can you kind of think of it as left brain, right brain too? Like the creative?
Yes, absolutely. I would think the right brain would be more moon and the left brain would be more sun.
So the right brain is more feminine people. People who, I'm a lefty, people who write with their left hand develop language on the right side of the brain. That's the more creative side. Whereas the left side of the brain is more like understanding things, studying for a test, doing this, go to the job, punch out.
Like, it's more abstract. Yeah. And that's crazy. I was lefty as a kid, and then they made me right.
Okay. Are you still ambidextrous?
I think so. It's messy, but I can still do it. And in my old job, I did everything with this hand too.
Yeah, there you go. We just talked about the full moon. Can you talk about a supermoon?
Oh yeah, supermoons, the intensity. To me, they're the same thing. I think they're just fancy words that people use. But it does represent when the moon is closest to the earth. So that's why they call it a supermoon. So it's
like when you look outside and it's just like right near.
Yeah, it's like charged up and it's so close to where we are and we can see it closest. And that's not an optical illusion. It's actually literally like closer to us.
Would that be the best time? Would that be the best time to charge your crystals that have?
I would think so. Yeah, for sure.
Probably that have, because you charge certain crystals you charge with the moonlight, certain ones you charge with the sunlight.
I think also it depends on your intentions because the waxing and the waning represent something as well. Let me pull that up real quick because I think it's important people learn these phases. I didn't realize that the phases mattered like that moon-wise until literally like 2 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I didn't think about that. So let me go to this moon phase. Sorry, I gotta find it in there. Okay, here it is. Okay, so when we have, right now we have a full moon and it's going to go to a waning moon. So that always follows a full moon. And when we have a new moon, then it goes to the waxing and that's always after the new moon. So when we're doing of course, full moons are like releases. It's about letting go. So then when it starts to wane, it's getting smaller day by day. If that makes sense until it gets to the new moon. And it's more so an impact on your emotions and your energy. So you can look at it as when it's full, your emotions are all the way peaked and you're like, I got to release this, right? I got to let this go. And then you start to let it go and you start to see it wane because it's starting to get small until you get to the new moon. And now you can initiate something new inside of you emotionally. And then from there, you can new intentions. You set that intention out, and then you see it wax as it grows for you. So that those are always, when you want to start things, you want to start on a new moon. When you want to finish something out, you want to get rid of it during a full moon.
So I'm going to explain something to you that I don't know if you know. My wife is Italian. She's first generation Italian here. Her parents grew up in the same town in Italy, and they used to make wine. And
oh yeah, that's how you do it too.
You could only the old way of doing it. The big barrels of wine, you could only transport them and move them during a full moon. You could only move them during a full moon.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I know this is going to probably left field. People are going to be like, why would she talk about that? But it's the same thing with like, from what I was reading when I was learning about drugs and stuff. I think people that make meth, they only can make it under a certain full moon or something. But it's because it's all elementals. So when you start to understand the chemistry, then you understand why those things are significant, which is now we're getting into alchemy. If you want to really alchemize something in your chart and change things, you've got to work with these, these movements.
Right. So can you define a transit for us?
Transits. Oh, I love that. Okay. So in astrology, we have our natal charts. And then when you want to get a transit reading, you would go to an astrologer. And what we do with that is we take your natal chart, your information at your birth, where everything is, and then we look at what's happening that day in the sky. So that is just us comparing the current planets to your birth planets.
So when you get when someone comes to you and they go, I'm about to make a big business deal, but I want to get a reading, you would do a transit.
I would absolutely do a transit. I would ask them, what day are you trying to get this up and going? And I would look at that day specifically, the days coming up before it, and the days after it to see the outcome. And I would look at, what planets are transiting around that time, what's touching, let's say the business dealing is in real estate. I would look at what's going on in the 8th house and in the 4th house and what transit planets are transiting there. And also look to Pluto, and I would look to potentially the moon, because the moon is money and Pluto has to do with, real big money. It rules big banks. So.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to save this for last, I'm going to save this for last. Okay. Are there masculine and feminine signs?
Yes, absolutely. Quote me if I'm wrong on this. The feminine signs would be Capricorn, Scorpio, Cancer, I think. Here, let me look that up. But yeah, so we have an equal amount of feminine and masculine energy. And believe it or not, like Saturn is masculine, but Capricorn is feminine. So people are always thrown off by that. Hold on, feminine signs. I'll get you the right ones. And that's important to know too, because then you understand how, someone will have what their disposition would be if it's more masculine or feminine. So the feminine signs are, Taurus, Cancer, like I said. All right, hold on. Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Capricorn, and Pisces. And the reason why we need to know that is because those signs turn more so inward. They use their inward, their feminine, their intuition more so to compel and really understand things and move in the world. And then your other masculine signs, they use more so outward expression. They're more assertive. They more find their information outwardly by, studying outward and being more abstract. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
So we obviously, each sign is 30 degrees. Mm-hmm. Yes. You sent me a list of words that we're going to go over, and you wrote cusp. I don't believe in it. But basically what a cusp is, people, is it's the last 3 days of a sign and the first 3 days of the new sign.
No, it's not that I don't believe in it, because I'm on a cusp. I'm the 25th of October, so I am literally like the day before me, I think, is Libra. So I also have a south node in Libra, and I have an intercepted 7th and 8th. So I have a lot of Venusian energy. So I can see how it's relatable. But when I actually started to understand and learn astrology, I realized that it's not that important, because if you're doing it according to your time of birth, you're just one sign or the other. You're not.
Well, I was under the impression that it was just basically, it's that 6-day period, the first 3 in a sign and then the first 3 out of a sign. I was under the impression it's just when the energies towards the end, they kind of blend into one another.
Yes, exactly. So somebody will have a blend of it. So like I said, I have like a lot of Venusian energy. But
like
when
I'm a cusp too. I'm 3 days into Libra, so I'm touching Virgo.
Yeah, you're like Virgo. Yeah, and so we can see that on someone a little bit. But when we start doing it from the time of birth, we start to see like, okay, no, you really are just this sign. So even though I'm on the cusp, I am a 2-degree Scorpio sun. So it might blend a little bit, but I'm still Scorpio.
Gotcha.
And I think that's why it's important that we know that time of birth, because people are going to run around like, oh, I'm Libra, Scorpio. And it's like, no, you're one or the other. You have a blend,
Right.
but you're one or the other.
Right. So each zodiac sign is 30 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Times 12, you get a full circle, 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
What are the critical degrees?
1, 29, 18, sheesh. I think really significantly 29 is the most critical to me. And this year 29 is very prevalent for us, and I'm going to tell you why. So we have Pluto, right? And Pluto's going to be moving in March into Aquarius, but it's only going to be there for a couple months, and then it's going to go back into Capricorn. So it's going to be doing this dance, okay, from this year, and then it fully goes into Aquarius in 2024. But the stance that it's going to do is at 29 degrees. So right now, Pluto's at 29 degrees. And 29 is intense. It's critical because it's the turning point from that end of that energy moving into another one. And so I also tell people too, so like if you take 2 plus 9, so this is numerology, we get 11. And so it's a master energy. It's an energy that you're going to have to master. You have to work with. And it's intense. And if you don't,
guys, real quick, let me just jump in. When you're talking about numerology, which is what she's doing right now, okay, my birthday is, so just so you guys can get me gifts, September 26, 83. So it's 92683, right? So 9 and 2 is 11, 6 is 17, 8 is 25, 3 is 28. Okay, when you
want to reduce those numbers to,
you want to reduce, so the last is so basically it's 28, so that reduces to 0. Now I didn't do this right because I didn't do 1983, but this basically reduces to 0. What she's talking about with 11 is every number can reduce between 1 and 9, every number, because even if you go from 475,
1 through 9, those are your prevalent
numbers. They all reduce. However, if you get an 11, that's known as a master number. You do not reduce the 11.
Yes. Now, in the numerology that I use, I do reduce the 11, but that's only because I look at the souls, where you are. So even though 11 is a master number, that doesn't mean you fully have hit that peak yet. But that's what you're going to be striving for. So it's almost like looking at the sun sign, like you're striving for that. You haven't mastered that yet. But people that do have 11s can go between. They can go between 2 and 11, depending on where their, where their maturity is, how far in their growth they are. So right now, I really only play with 1 and 9. So that 11 with that Pluto, we know it's a master number. But if I reduce it, we're looking at 2. So most of us are going to be dealing with things that have to do with structure and stability this year, because Pluto's coming to change that. And we know it because it's in Capricorn. It just did a whole bunch of shit for the last 20 years in Cap with our systems and authorities, because that's what Cap rules. And so once it moves and it goes into Aqua, we're going to see the collective having to deal with these transitions. But we understand that it's going between, Aqua and 29 degrees Capricorn. If we reduce that 11 to 2, we understand that the mission is we got to master it to 11 to change, but we have to change our stability, because it's 2. 2 deals with stability. It deals with partnerships, contracts. It deals with money, it deals with stability. So a lot of our stuff's going to be a little bit shaken this year, because we have a lot of changes coming with our money, our structure, our stability. So that's kind of how I do my readings. But so Pluto is very, very significant this year because of that. We are also in a Pluto year. I think United States just went through a Pluto return. 1770 something is when we established.
Yeah, what is it, every 220 years or something?
280 something, 280, 270. Let me see. I think Pluto orbits 280 some years. And so we've reached that here in the United States when we were, technically established as America. And so knowing that, we know that we're about to see great change because of it. Pluto is the transformer. So it comes to transform it but sometimes it's painful because Pluto is also the energy of death. It's the energy of endings. And we know that deaths can be painful. Endings can be hard. So not everybody is going to be able to handle it that well, especially if they don't have this understanding. So it's not like the world is going to end, but the world as we know it is about to end, and we're going into a new one. So how we see money is going to change, how we structure things, our systems, how the collective is treated, because Aqua is a man sign. So it's about us now. And it's in a revolutionary sign. So we're going to see a lot of rebellion, lots of revolutions in things that have to do with man and technology, because Aqua rules technology, which is why they're going to digitize our money. Let's be real. So let's see, Pluto orbits 200, what? 248.
248. See, we were kind of both in the middle.
Both in there. I know there was 8.
Yeah. How mad were you when they demoted Pluto?
I was offended because I am Pluto all day. But I see why they did it, because of how far out it is. It does have, it's for our trajectory, it doesn't look like a planet. Right. However, the intensity and the power that it has, it's definitely a planet.
So for people who want to understand how something so far can affect you, you have to understand is that space and time is an illusion to begin with.
Facts.
Okay? Space and time is an illusion to begin with. So this is just a holographic universe. Mm-hmm. The universe is said to be so big. It's said to be 93 billion miles across, when supposedly we're only 15 billion years old. Now that makes sense if you understand time dilation and the speed that things expand. But this is all just a holograph. It's so absurdly big, it should just give you a clue that it's just a holograph. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing. Pluto may be so far away in our reality that we live in. Space and time is an illusion. All this is happening at the same time. Yeah. All these energies are affecting everything. So I just wanted to go into one thing that you wanted to talk about that we didn't. Asteroids.
Yes. Okay. So what I've learned about astrology is first of all, when you finally get introduced to astrology and not horoscopes, that represents that your conscious has opened up. You are now found another dimension. Okay. This is exactly what happens in space, or whatever they want to call it, when we are figuring out new planets and new asteroids. So like we talked about earlier before we got on this live, when we found Pluto, 19, whatever, I can't remember the year, that's when we were aware of its effects on Earth. So even though it's up there, we might not even know it's there, but it's going to affect us. And until we realize what's happening energy-wise, then it doesn't pop up. So this is what I've learned about asteroids. I got into astrology. I started learning everything, all the planets, all the important ones, right? And then, certain asteroids popped up. So the first one that popped up for me was Lilith. And Lilith is funny because I was working with my Lilith energy anyways for so many years. So of course she popped up for me. She's like, hey, I'm here. And then I got an understanding with her, and that consciousness grew. And then
Lilith, real quick, Lilith, by the way, you're not going to find it in the Bible, but you'll find this in some older texts. Lilith was Adam's first wife, and she was the divine feminine. And what she did was God made her for Adam, but she refused to lay down in the missionary position for sex for Adam because she wanted to be equal, and she felt that being beneath him was less than equal.
And so she got taken out. And so in astrology, for us, we look, even though we do subscribe to that, we understand it in a different way. We look at Lilith as the woman that doesn't want to submit and be inauthentic with herself, who doesn't want to limit herself, who understands that she's here to also be a divine feminine.
But she gets punished. She gets punished because she ends up becoming the mother of demons,
right? In mythology, which in astrology, Lilith can be hard to deal with because she's the mother of the demon. So now you're dealing with all of your inner demons when you're dealing with Lilith. But Lilith is also seen in guys' charts too. So guys have a Lilith and they deal with their inner demons as well. And then so with guys though, you can always tell what a guy likes sexually, what he's actually like aroused by looking at where his Lilith is. And he will always try to find a Lilith woman. Now he might not marry her because it's not Eve, but he's going to try to do something with her. So it's the desired woman that he's not going to commit to, but he secretly has this thing for her. You know what I mean? And I look at those people as like the misfits, like you know, strippers, prostitutes, those type of women in society. You know, the authentic woman who's like not going to submit, or even the polyandry type of women would be considered Lilith because she wants more than one husband.
Right.
So she popped up first, then after Lilith. And so I'm going to actually talk about this. I'm okay with putting it out there. Lilith popped up for me during my Saturn return after I divorced with my husband. So we had something happen that was really like sexually messed up. And then Lilith showed up for me. And she actually really helped me heal a lot of what I went through in that trauma. And she liberated me. And once she liberated me, then Ceres came. And Ceres is another asteroid who is the mothering. It's the nurturing. She's relatable to Virgo, but also Scorpio in a sense, where it teaches you how to mother yourself and love yourself. So it was funny how Lilith came, the woman that goes against marriage and tradition during my divorce. And then here comes Ceres to help me nurture the stuff that I went through. So I noticed that with astrology, the stars, asteroids, trans-Neptunian planets, these things do not pop up in your consciousness until you're ready to work with them. So there are some astrologers that don't work with them. There is one, I'm going to shout her out. She's the bomb. It's called Lunatic Astrology on YouTube. She is so amazing. She works with asteroids. She does Hellenistic astrology using Western tropical traditions, whole house systems. And I'm telling you, like, when you start working with these asteroids, they're like a magnifying glass to the story, and they just kind of get more deep with it. They show you more areas of how you can open up these energies and release yourself from these, these traumas and these things. So
what are some other kinds of asteroids?
Let's see. We have a whole asteroid belt that sits between, Jupiter. So you have the first planets, or you have your sun, and then after the sun, it's all your personal planets, and then you have your transgenerational planets, which is Saturn and Jupiter, and then comes the asteroids. And after the asteroids is the outer planets, which starts like Neptune, Pluto, Uranus. So they sit between this belt. And they, like I said, they don't pop up for you until after Jupiter, which is when you start to expand your consciousness. Okay. Because Jupiter rules the higher, Uranus rules the higher mind, but Jupiter rules learning and teaching and, you know what I mean? Wisdom and stuff like that. But so we have, God, how many freaking asteroids? There's so many. But we have Ceres, we have Lilith, we have, gosh, I'm having a brain fart right now. Palos, Athena, that's one asteroid. But all of these asteroids are also women, by the way.
I was just going to point that out.
They're feminine. Yeah, I'm about to look them up so I can tell you the exact asteroid belt. Here we go. Okay, so yeah, so they sit between Jupiter. So there's thousands of asteroids, and there you go. They orbit between Mars and Jupiter because it's after Mars, those are your personal planets, and then you have the asteroids, and then you have Jupiter, which starts the Neptune or trans-Neptunian planets.
Are these from the asteroid belt?
Yes, all of these.
Because a lot of people, some will say that the asteroid belt was a planet that collided with another planet.
And then it crashed, and then they broke up into little ones and became their own energy. I do subscribe to that. I do believe that's what happened. But we have Palos, Juno, Vesta, Sirius. I think there's like 7 major asteroids that astrologers are using now. And I feel like because consciously humanity is starting to understand that they're there, and they're starting to understand that they're working with them too. So Sirius, Juno, Vesta, Palos, Chiron, Eros, and Lilith. Those are your first asteroids that we're working with. And I think in astrology, Venus and Moon are the only planets that represent feminine or female, technically. And so now when we have the asteroid belt, it fills in the blank for all like the other feminine stuff that we deal with on Earth, because if we go back to ancient times, that energy was really suppressed. Like we did not, women had to be quiet, like we couldn't vote. But even before that, like we go way back in time, like women couldn't do anything. And I think it's because we did not understand that vibration, that energy yet. But now as we are growing and moving into the age of Aquarius, the feminine is expanding more. It's starting to understand itself and see itself. So these asteroids pop up more now.
Gotcha. So the last thing that I wanted to bring up before we close is, do you look at Algol at all? And if you could describe Algol, where it is, because actually I think you said it's fixed in Taurus, right?
It is
It's
26
fixed.
degrees in Taurus. It never moves.
Explain what Algol is and what it means.
It's a fixed star, for one. So it sits in Taurus, 26 degrees. Algol in mythology is the demon star, which represents, some people call it Medusa. And it's because Medusa was cutting people's heads, and Algo actually represents that, like losing your head in astrology, but not literally like your head getting cut off. It can be literal. It's really scary how literal astrology can be, but shying away from like the mundane aspect of it, it could just mean like losing your head, like losing your mind and going to do something crazy. Algo is technically a malefic. So malefics in astrologies are negative energy, demon, evil, as people say, So when dealing with that, we can deal with anything that has a lower vibration when we're looking at Algo. So for instance, I think Algo rules alcohol because it lowers your vibration, and it opens you up for other entities to jump in and out of you. And this is what we call, when someone's like stupid drunk and they're like a whole different person now. This is why, because they're opened up. Alcohol opens you up, and other energies are just jumping in and out of you. So now your whole persona has changed. But I look at it as the reason why that happens with alcohol is because the other layers of you that you have inside that you don't deal with, your inner demon starts to show. And so that's why some people can be erratic when they're drunk, and some can be belligerent, and some can be mean and get violent, and others can lose their head and murder. So Algo has a significance with losing your head in that sense, and that's how I look at it.
Beautiful. Priscilla, this was wonderful. Hour and 12 minutes. Tell everyone where they could find you if anybody wants a reading, how to reach out to you. And guys, you can always reach out to me. A lot of people reach out to me and they're like, what's your astrologer's name? Can you hook us up? And then I usually do.
I am not fully out there yet. I've been going through my dark night of the soul. So I feel like I'll be ready in March. Saturn moves into my first house. So it's going to ground everything that I'm trying to do, visionary wise.
Just let everyone know how they could find you.
It's spiritcoachingastrology.com. I also have apps now. So if you have Android or iPhone, you can just download Spirit Coaching Astrology in the App Store, and you can book with me that way. I do have my podcast on there too. You don't have to make an account to watch that if you're not, ready to do a reading yet. Trying to think what else. Yeah, where you can do the website. I'm also on Twitter. My handle is at Lolita Astrology. And then I'm on Facebook as well. Priscilla Rosado Cruz. It's okay. I'll put my name out there. Those are really my only platforms. Oh, I have Instagram, Spirit Coaching Astrology as well. But I will have YouTube soon. I will have my own podcast, and I'm going to be doing not just live, transit readings for people, but I think I'm going to bring in a lot of astrologers from different techniques and just kind of bring it all in. I think we need this more understanding on why each system actually works and can kind of stop the whole bicker. Because there's so many people that are like, well, I don't like Western, I do Vedic. And it's like, it doesn't matter. They both really are going to teach you the things that you need to learn. So,
right.
But yeah, that's where you can find me, spiritcoachingastrology.com.
So Priscilla, thank you for coming on. I'm going to put this up right away. I'll send you the link.
Yes.
You are one of my best friends and an amazing astrologer. Thank you for explaining all that stuff. I know people are probably going to watch it a couple times just to catch some stuff.
It's a lot.
But let me know when that gift comes in tonight. Just shoot me a text.
I'm so excited for that.
Let me know when it comes in, and I'm going to put this up right now. So thank you so much.
You knew, you read my mind. I didn't even tell you I was going to do that. That's crazy.
I will talk to you later, hon, okay?
All right. Talk to you later. Thank you.